Satoru Gojo from Jujutsu Kaisen has had my interest for a while now, and it's not necessarily because he's a thought-provoking character or anything. What piques my interest the most are his abilities. For some reason, Jujutsu Kaisen has had a hard time explaining things, and Gojo's power set is not an exception. Gojo's abilities are so complicated that Gege Akatami has had to use higher math to explain how any of it is even possible. So I thought I'd do the same. For context, I'm a STEM major, and I'm currently taking calculus and physics. And while I won't be using physics for this video, I'm gonna be doing my best to explain Satoru Gojo with what knowledge of calculus I have. I've personally worked with some of my classmates as well as asked some of my professors about some concepts that I bring up in this video, so shout out to them. I also have not done any research on other people's interpretations of Gojo's abilities. I'm simply going to be using what knowledge of calculus I have as well as the story to explain Gojo and the Limitless curse technique. I am aware that some people have talked about this before, however I don't know if it's necessarily going to be on the same degree that I will be doing for my explanation. The most I've seen are narrative-driven arguments, and that's not what I'm going to be doing in this video. Also, this is a spoiler for Jujutsu Kaisen. I don't necessarily think it'll be manga spoilers. If you watch the anime, you should be fine to watch this video. Being a part of the Gojo clan, Satoru has inherited the Limitless curse technique. The Limitless allows Gojo to manipulate an infinite amount of information in multiple ways to benefit himself. For the sake of the video, think of the concept of information as strictly math, and tons of it. The only reason why I say this is when Gojo's abilities are discussed in canon, they're treated like quantitative sets of data instead of qualitative, even though the ability also includes the latter half of information, as this distinction is never actually made. These multiple forms of manipulation include neutral, blue, red, and purple. I'm going to start with neutral first, as not only does this have to do the most with calculus, but it's easily the most confusing thing to explain to someone, as infinity is not a concept that humanity can truly grasp on any type of level. Gojo initially describes Limitless as an ability that infinitely slows down an object, making it appear to be motionless. However, this explanation changes when he uses the Achilles paradox to once again explain the ability. Of course, these explanations are separated by 10 years, and people can learn and change during that time, but both explanations come across as contradictory. If I were to define the neutral Limitless in a mathematical sense, the neutral application of Limitless actualizes an infinite limit between Gojo and his opponent. For people who don't study calculus, a limit is the recognizable behavior of a mathematical function as it reaches a certain value. In this example, if I were to find the limit of this equation as it approaches, let's say, 2, the limit would be 5. As from both the left and the right side of the graph, the behavior of this line approaches the number 5. Now, while there are many intricacies to limits that affect how we define what the answer to a limit actually is, all you need to know is that a limit isn't about an exact point, but rather a graph's behavior as both sides of an equation approach an arbitrary x value. The entire Limitless curse technique is just the bare bones and simplest definition of a limit. Keen viewers might have noticed that I've only explained a limit. In my definition specifically, I specified the actualization of an infinite limit. So what is an infinite limit? Similarly to the last example, let's look at a limit that exists at 2. Notice how instead of approaching an actual number, it goes off the graph. This is what we call a limit that approaches infinity, or an infinite limit. Instead of a defined point on the graph, the equation keeps scaling to a value that it will never reach. And this is what Gojo does with Limitless. Imagine an opponent fighting Gojo as a function, with x being the value where Gojo resides in any location of space, and the limit being the space between himself and his opponent. In this case of an infinite limit, as an opponent approaches Gojo, the space between them would just keep growing, attempting to approach a concept that can never be reached. For people that better understand math, the behavior of Gojo and his opponent become asymptotal. A lot of people think that infinity itself is an incredibly large amount of an object, which is true in some cases, but it's such an understatement when you think about it. The concept of infinity can't even be counted or even conceived to be counted. When it comes to blue and red, a stupid amount of energy is needed to be created. Luckily, JJK gives us a perfect explanation to how these abilities are created. Miguel explains that the Limitless curse technique is able to manipulate space on an atomic level. Assuming that the space of the universe is created by math, Gojo's ability to manipulate these mathematical constants on an atomic level would lead me to believe that he would be able to recreate the effects of nuclear fission. or in layman's terms, the splitting of the atom. This nuclear fission is the reason why some people would consider America to be war criminals.
Look, he killed me with a stun. A stun, he can't use a stun. Yeah, guys, look. Hey, disconnected.
So we have a battery, but how would it even be possible to condense space in the same way that Gojo does? Toji describes blue as an amplification of the neutral limitless, implying that both are closely related. Let's look at the linear limit that I showed you at the beginning of the video. As you can see, the limit of this function is 5, as both sides of an equation approach this single point. A limit like this exists when everything begins to approach a single point from all directions. Essentially, Gojo creates this definition of a limit in 3D space. Gojo can freely create a mathematical function that personifies the definition of a continuous limit. Having objects isolated in space approach a single point of his choosing. We call the limit continuous as the point of the function matches the actual graph's behavior.
収束発散この虚空に触れたらどうなると思う術式反転赤
I originally thought that red was an inverse function of blue, considering that Gojo describes red as the opposite of blue. However, there's not a way to notate an inverse limit, or even the behavior of a graph as it leaves a point. Although there are many opposites to a continuous limit, these occurrences are called discontinuities. Discontinuities being divided into 3 categories, being removable, jump, and an infinite discontinuity. I don't want to spend too much time explaining each of them, but one specifically looks like the effects of red, being an infinite discontinuity. When looking at a limit such as this, we can see that the behavior of a graph doesn't encroach upon a single point. Instead, it seems that the graph moves to the opposite sides of infinity, from both the left and the right. In a sense, the graph, instead of being drawn to a single point, is repelled from a single point. While Gojo actualizes a continuous limit using blue, he does the opposite, actualizing an infinite discontinuity when utilizing red, causing objects within a 3D space to repel from a selected point in space.
順転と反転それぞれの無限を衝突させることで生成される仮想の質量を押し出す挙式紫
Hollow Purple is oddly enough the ability I had the most trouble explaining, mainly due to how canon explains the ability as well as how calculus approaches numbers. During his fight with Toji, Gojo explains that when combining red and blue, an imaginary mass is created. Now, the concept of an imaginary mass isn't real, but imaginary numbers are. And this is what stumped me at first, because no matter how much I played with the idea of an imaginary number and calculus, nothing ended up linking together. And that's when it hit me. Hollow Purple is the absence of calculus. All of mathematics, and numbers for that matter, is predicated on the idea of a complex number. Complex numbers are comprised of 2 parts, being real numbers and imaginary numbers. When you think of a number, I guarantee you're thinking of a real number. Real numbers represent money, areas of space, and pretty much anything that math is applied to. The other side of this mathematical coin is called an imaginary number. These numbers also play a role in reality, being applied in physics as well as solutions to depressed cubics. However, the effects of these values on reality aren't noticeable since they represent paradoxical ideas, like negative space. For obvious reasons, nothing can exist in negative space. The concept of negative space itself is also impossible. Even negative numbers themselves make no sense when discussed in a vacuum. The study of calculus only focuses on real numbers. Imaginary numbers are ignored due to their paradoxical methods of logic. This is perfect for explaining Hollow Purple. In both proposed definitions, red and blue are based in calculus. Not only that, but they are inverses of each other. In math, when inverses are applied to each other, they simply cancel each other out, which makes perfect sense. Gojo claims that blue is comprised of negative energy, and red is positive energy. This supports that both energies are inverses of each other, and that their combination creates 0. However, this 0 isn't actually a 0. It's the imaginary number, or mass, that is left in a complex number when the value of its associated real number is 0. And that's it. Gojo combines red and blue to eliminate the real numbers that comprise the complex one. And with only the imaginary number left, this negative space is able to be applied to opponents, removing whatever it comes in contact with. And now you know how to delete your friends in real life. Just create an impossibility that wipes them out from the face of the earth. In game, of course. Alright.
As you guys can see, look, he killed me with a stun. A stun, he can't use a stun. Yeah, guys, look. Yeah, look, guys, look. Hey, disconnected. Yeah, guys, look. Thanks for watching, guys. GG. Give me the viewing because I have that reason. They kill me with the stun and drop hose. Yeah, guys, thanks for watching. GG.